And here's Ken.
Yasmin is ill and isn't coming tonight.
Here's Ellen.
There's Ellen.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, Ellen.
Hello.
I don't know if Bill's coming tonight or not.
Don't know.
Let's see, I was emailing with him about something else today. Let me see if he mentioned it. I can't access that email. And Rebecca hasn't been here the past couple, well, last time she wasn't here, the time before she was. And I haven't heard from her.
Ellen, are you able to put the document up again this week like we did last week?
Yes.
I'll make you a co-host.
That's
Thank you.
dangerous. Be careful.
I try to contain you as much as I can, Ellen, but it's almost impossible.
It is, I know. It's how I roll. Sorry about that.
We appreciate it.
You live with it or with that's the way it is. Irrepressible. I think that's the word. Let's see. I think I don't need that. I do want that. I can make this smaller. I want to see you all. Let's see.
Who would have thought we would have been out preparing our yards for the winter on November 9th?
I'm being too hot.
We're going to have the best prepared yards for the winter in the history of the town of Caroline, if it ever comes.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I know Rebecca's had alternating things, right? Wasn't it Rebecca who couldn't come? Or was that Catherine? I think it was Rebecca.
That was Rebecca, so she should be coming.
This would be an on week as opposed to an off week?
Well, she wasn't here last week, so I'm assuming.
Okay.
And then Yasmin is ill.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
it's really Rebecca and Bill, the only people we'd be waiting for. And why don't we just wait another minute to see if Rebecca comes? Before she comes, maybe I can just mention, put on our radar screens a little bit of business, which is just the calendar that we now have in front of us. So the moratorium ends currently on December 10th. And we have a town board agenda meeting on December 1st and a town business meeting on December 9th. Between that, we have potential meetings on the 16th, the 23rd, the 30th, and the 1st. I wanted to mention this because probably we're going to want to provide the board with some kind of a written document report. And I'd assume that if we did that, we'd probably want to go over a draft at one meeting before finalizing it, or if we're really efficient, do the draft before the final meeting. Some of the urgency of our action could be clarified after this Thursday's November board business meeting. It's on Thursday this month instead of Wednesday because Wednesday is Veterans Day. So we might have a better idea of what the board is thinking about. Right, Mark? Probably after Thursday.
Probably, yeah.
And that'll help us understand the urgency. Regardless, our charge was to work through December, and I would prefer for the committee everybody's worked so hard that I think that ideally you'll have all the ducks in order to move on to a quiet winter life. unless
Um,
you're
Tim,
called upon for other Caroline tasks.
Tim, this is Barb.
Barb.
I'm not quite sure that I understand what you're getting at there, and I'm wondering. You know, we've talked in this group about the moratorium ending December 10th. So does the board need a formal recommendation from this group? Excuse me, that the moratorium should be extended?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
sorry, Barb. I was just trying to put it on our radar screen to get us to think towards coming towards a conclusion. I mean, we've got at least another month to do that, but I just wanted us to kind of metacritically have the calendar in the back of our heads.
Yeah.
I believe the board next Thursday is going to be discussing this.
Oh, okay.
But it's still very vague, so I don't know what to say, but I think it will be discussed.
Okay, you know, the reason I'm asking, you know, even if our discussion goes very smoothly tonight, and then this week we're able to revise the law language and the standards document language, if the board is intending to hold public hearings, you know, that's a period of time, and then whatever the time frame is that it has to be posted before it can be voted on, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't seem to me that a change in the site plan law nor the standards document, if there's going to be a public hearing, is likely to occur before December 10th. So that's what I'm just trying to understand from a process standpoint, what the board is thinking.
I think we'll know definitively by next meeting.
I guess can I just chime in here? I mean, I feel like, you know, I think what the charge for this group is to, you know, provide information on various, some were identified, and we also left it open to others that might be explored, but land use guidance tools that the board might wish to implement, and that's what you've been doing. And so, you know, and we've also been waiting for the completion of the comprehensive plan, which is now quite imminent. So, you know, with that, then I think it's incumbent upon the town board to make a decision about, you know, what kind of what would be appropriate measures, whether they wish to extend the moratorium if they find that to be called for. Then, you know, that's the word. So I guess I'm just trying to point, I don't feel like this group should feel like you're racing towards a target date or anything. It's just, you know, bringing forth information to provide to the town board to make a good decision. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Tim, I should just say, I just faded out. I may have a lot of trouble tonight.
I caught you, Barbara. I'm like a trampoline.
Yeah, you came in twice.
I'll keep an eye out.
Okay.
So with that being said, I just wanted to kind of, you know, keep in mind where we are on the calendar. Shall we just truck ahead and
Can I just ask one question on that?
Great. Sorry about it.
So certainly a written report to the town board, you know, is definitely anticipated. Are you thinking that might be for the December 1 meeting, or would it be closer to the end of the year? I've been anticipating early December, that we would probably be sending something to this group to be reviewed, you know, in the next couple of meetings.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of what I was gesturing towards.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I think if we have any flexibility, we'll know next week. We'll have a better idea next week. But I'd also like to, you know, the holidays are coming up and everybody's been working really hard, so that if we can bring things to a helpful resolution, all the better, right? Without cutting corners. And we don't want to do that. Does that help, Greg?
Yes, Thanks.
Okay, great. So I guess, Ellen, you're going to put up the site plan review law again?
Yeah. What am I sharing? Are you there?
We see
Yes.
it,
You see probably a lot more, but you see that, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
one page.
Okay.
And to see the rest, you just need to scroll down probably.
So what page are we on? Do you
So,
remember?
Ellen, we were around page 25 or so. I'm not quite sure because I've been adding to this as with comments. But around page 25, item J, air quality. There you go, right
Perfect.
there.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and just a reminder, as we talk about this, we're just going to ignore all the must stuff because we're not going to be recommending the change from shall to must. So if we go to K in sound.
Actually, hold on one second.
Sure.
While we're on air quality, I realized I had made some comments to the town board a while ago about when the site plan review law was being revised some. And I don't know that it belongs here, but I think maybe it does. I don't know. So air quality is regulated by DEC, right? And EPA. One of the things towns can do is ask for copies of both the permits that they would have and any monitoring that they're required to do, have those be sent to the town. You follow me? And I don't know whether that belongs in this law. So this is for plans, so I suppose it doesn't.
Well, I guess it would depend on when the regulatory documents from DEC or EPA, if it's federal, would be received by the developer, because other things that are permitting requirements for other topics, and I can't point them out randomly here, but they are in here. Other things where permits are required are included in the law. So what we could do, if air quality kind of permitting occurs prior to the development being built, we could borrow that language and copy it in here. Greg, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines, Barb, that yeah, I think this would be the place to ask for those plans and specifications.
Good. You know, I don't see any reason why the town wouldn't want to have them.
Right.
Okay, great.
Okay. So under sound, we suggest, the subcommittee suggests adding an item: sound emanating from the site beyond the property must be limited to 60 decibels daytime and 50 nighttime. And these values, I believe, came from some information that Michelle had found for another municipality. So I don't know, Michelle, if you want to share any detail on that you recall.
I don't think I'm the one that found that.
Oh, okay.
That's not familiar to me.
Ellen, was that you? Somebody suggested this.
I don't remember where those numbers came from. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
wondering if you happen to have consulted the previously unsuccessful noise ordinance regarding what it was trying to accomplish in this regard.
not to my knowledge.
Because we probably want to have some better understanding of the history of these numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 60 decibels, I read this, it's supposed to be normal conversation. And the question is, would you want a normal conversation going on from the house next door that you could hear as a normal conversation all day long? The other thing on sound issues is frequencies are also just about as important for human health as decibels. So I think some attention has to be paid to both. And I think this one needs a bit more research.
Is that something you could work on?
I can try, yeah.
Yeah, that would be helpful, Barbara, if you can. I'll go back through the notes and see when this was inserted and at whose suggestion. But I recall somebody making a reference to this from other existing standards in a different community. So we'll track that down. But the frequencies piece, Barbara, if you can look into that and get back to the subcommittee, that would be great.
I think Ken wanted to talk.
Sorry, Ken, I can't see you on my screen.
I have a.
I have you.
Okay, that's all right. You know, I know on the road is a little different story, but you see a lot of places 90 decibels. And Michelle was talking about, well, if a conversation was going on, that's normal. If a commercial place was built and they have trucks coming in, are they going to be expected to stay at these levels? That's just a question that might be looked at while you're trying to figure out where those numbers came from. I mean, trucks come with deliveries. So I don't know. I know on the road, I think 90 decibels is usually what they have to maintain or below that. So a question to add to that part there. Thanks.
That's helpful. Yeah, I was just going to say that I think in looking at this, it would be helpful to determine if the source was from an urban source or a rural source as well, because I mean, rural communities could have agricultural noise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's just a little bit different, but something we need to clarify.
And it also, I think Ken's point was partly that it also could be ephemeral. I mean, constant noise at that level is one thing, but a truck coming in, delivering.
Right.
I think it's complicated.
Right.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you said there was an unsuccessful noise ordinance proposed in the town?
Probably the most controversial thing that's ever happened in this town in the past 25 years.
Really?
You didn't, so this, Ellen, this might have been just before you moved into the town, actually. I bet it was. It might have been it was when Tim Seeley was on the town board, so it might have been, I'm not sure when it was, but there was a very aggressive noise law proposed that received quite a bit of pushback and mixed support across the town. So it's just something that I think we need to keep in mind.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to lighting. Bill had made some suggestions about the lighting component of this, and that to make sure that the law referred to the model lighting ordinance of the International Dark Sky Association, which it does, that's current language. So what we're proposing is to keep the reference to the model lighting ordinance, but delete standards because it's called the model lighting ordinance in the International Dark Sky Association. And then the item 3, that's there, that talks about outdoor lighting and community standards information sheet number 172. Bill indicated, and I looked back at the website and confirmed that this part is outdated. That really the most up-to-date piece is the model lighting ordinance, which is referred to in item II.
Great.
Okay. And then the subcommittee does change item Roman numeral 3, excessive lighting for promotional visibility purposes is not allowed rather than shall be discouraged. Comments about that?
Whatever excessive means. Of course, you shouldn't allow anything excessive, but.
And then the next item, Roman numeral 4, the notion about as possible controls that automatically extinguish outdoor lighting should be used, and then changing the hours of allowable lighting instead of going off at 11 p.m. going off at 10 p.m. And exceptions can be granted, which is in the current law.
Is there a reason for changing it to 10?
I think the subcommittee was just, generally thinking about keeping light more limited and quality of life. And some people, like to go to bed by that time and don't like the glare from around. Some people like to look at the stars at night. So thinking about when businesses are typically open, if businesses are open at, at that hour, exceptions can be granted. So really just, I think a quality of life issue. Michelle or Ellen, you want to weigh in?
Exactly as you said. I mean, I don't know of any businesses that are open that late. I would make it 9 o'clock myself, but I also think because if there are open, or if, let's say, you're bringing in the hay and you have lights or whatever, you can get an exception. So it just seems to me unnecessary to have lights on that late.
I agree.
And again, I'll ask about deliveries there. What if there are some businesses that have like a main warehouse, and then they run through the evening. They have the fellow doing that running grabs up all these parts, and he knows he's got a route he goes, and he has keys to get in each. I just happen to have a Napa bill here, so I'm going to just use Napa as a name. I know that they have delivery guys with keys that come all hours of the night, so that the next morning people have their parts, especially automobile mechanics, whatever. And I don't know if they actually need lights. Some of them, the back door is where they shine their car on it, I guess, and I just I'm not sure that how late is Dandy open? They have gasoline, but you're saying that you could ask for a variance there. I don't have a problem with that then, I guess.
Exactly.
I don't have a problem with that.
Would
If every Thursday night they had to have lights on for the delivery guy, I'm sure that everybody could be congenial about that, the site review plan people.
Yep.
It does look like that, yeah, Dandy Mini Mart is open till 11.
yeah.
So they would ask for an exception.
Well, they're probably grandfathered.
Yes, they probably can do whatever they want, huh? Good question.
Michelle has a question.
All right.
Michelle.
Thanks.
Well, I guess my question is, would you want to live next to a place like that, Ken? Would you want people, your next door neighbor, having deliveries at 11 o'clock at night and making all kinds of noise?
It's not going to bother me. I live just off of 79, and when I first moved here, the road was probably 20 feet closer to my house than when it was. After 3 nights of hearing trucks, I never hear them again.
Come on over to my house, Ken.
I go to bed and
Well,
huh?
I just have to say,
I
I
didn't
live in a very peaceful place, and it would really disturb me if if my neighbors suddenly started having deliveries going on all hours of the night and even up until 11 o'clock, it would really, it would probably disturb my property values, and it would ruin my health. And
So I think what we're
I think we
talking
should think about stuff like that.
well, that's where I think what we're talking about is if it requires an exception, then that's the time at which the site plan review committee would be reviewing these things. And that's the time at which neighbors should be talking to the review committee and saying, I don't think you should give an exception for this because you're going to disturb me and disturb my property. And that's the kind of thing that would have to be weighed by the review board to see whether they would grant an exception or not. Because I agree with you, Michelle, my opinion. And that's again where zoning may come into play, because zoning can say you can't have a use that's going to require nighttime deliveries next to residential properties. So I think that's why we're trying not to make it a blanket okay, but rather say it would have to be granted by an exception.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with that too. That's a good point, Ellen, that ideally these are administered under a zoning ordinance that delineates commercial areas outside of residential areas, so that that doesn't happen abutting residential areas.
Isn't there in building something, an ordinance that says within X number of feet, and I think it's 500, but I'm not sure, all neighbors have to be told about it
Notified.
and have a meeting. Yeah.
There are
Do
no,
we- in building permits or someplace there?
That number rings the bell regarding the agricultural data statement, that if there are certain types of developments happening within 500 feet of a property in an agriculture district, then those property owners would be notified. But I don't recall the town having anything else outside of ag uses being notified.
that's a really good point.
Okay.
We ought to have that, don't you think?
Well, it's that depends on what the town, how the town feels. Most of the times you want to, there's a balance of keeping property owners in the know of what's going on, but in a place that is very, very active with development, it can be very exhausting for resources of a town to continually notify property owners of what's happening. So maybe it's appropriate in a town like Caroline, where maybe not much development happens, that they're notified. But certainly in larger areas or just more populous areas, more development happening, typically it's only very certain high threshold type of developments, such as rezonings or large developments, or special use permits, things that need an extra level of review. Those are the ones where property owners can be notified, but it's a choice of the town.
I guess it seems to me that in our town, which is a small town, and there's not a tremendous lot of things happening all the time, that it ought to be a requirement. And I thought actually in some places it's a requirement of the applicant to at least identify all properties within a certain distance. And it can be a requirement for the applicant to notify. I'm wondering whether that happened in our cell tower law. There was something recently where I thought that was required. And in terms of that, another thing that's very useful, I think, is a sign being required that goes up that says, I've seen ones, this property is up for subdivision review or something. So that's a way to notify people in the town about it. who might be concerned. So I think that's a really good point. I think we ought to be adding it to this law.
Barbara Lynch, oh, you're just saying yes.
Yeah,
So,
I just want to agree.
so if there is concurrence to add it to the law, Greg, could you provide language, from a similar kind of municipality so that, we're not trying to write the language from scratch? Do you know of something that we could, mimic language from?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly look into that. Yeah, and I'll just kind of follow up by just saying, just to reiterate, yeah, there are state requirements that require notification for certain things, and then towns can take that a step further. So if that is of interest for the committee, then yeah, I can look into that and see, other examples in the area and just provide just things that might be, language at least. So I can't think of any off the top of my head, but.
Okay, well, that would be helpful. So on this one though,
Ellen?
item 4, what I was hearing from the earlier discussion is that folks are okay with this, with the language as proposed. Okay. Ellen had her hand up though about maybe something else. I'm not sure.
When Greg is researching this notification deal, does this committee, do we want to wait till he has something, or do we want to say, gee, we like the idea that there's a sign required, and you would have to say what kind of size? And do we like the idea that it's going to be up to the applicant to provide notice to people within 500 feet or whatever? I think it would be useful if we gave Greg some guidance about what we would like to see. Personally, I would put it in the hands of the applicant, that they would provide to the town both a list of who's within that distance and that they be required to send a notice. I'm not sure at what point, when they formally file an application, I suppose. And then I also very much think the idea of a sign on the road of a certain size saying something is being proposed would be a good idea.
Yeah, and typically developers are required, if they are required to, or if there is a notification, yeah, I can't think of a municipality that would take that on. Usually the postage is required to be covered by the developer, and the town can set those limits. Is it 500 feet? Is it a quarter mile? So what I'm hearing is that this would apply to all developments that would go through site plan review, correct?
I think
Okay.
that's what's being said, yeah.
Okay. And so there's going to be some sort of notification. It'll probably say something about, days before a public hearing that it's required. Signs can definitely be required to be put up by a developer. I've never seen one that's so specific about the size of a sign, but certainly you could just say a 3x3 foot sign or something. So yeah, I mean, I can look into, but I want to get that frame of reference here, that's what everyone is on board with. And so notification, mailings, a sign, those 3 kind of general.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's it, except to not signage the size of a billboard, reflecting on our earlier discussions that nobody wants billboards.
Yeah, I mean, well.
not to go there, but yes, I think you're on target there, Greg. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, then moving on under the lighting section, the last item is just to add in that the review board may require a photometric plan with the site plan. And this is a may require, it's not required of everybody automatically. And that was something that was in the referred to in the guidelines document, but now we're moving into the law document and there's a definition of a photometric plan earlier in the definitions.
Good.
Okay. All right. So then Moving on to section M, which is energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. You know, per Ken's comment from last time, we will define greenhouse gas emissions in the definition section, which is earlier in the document. So that definition is to be added. And then what the subcommittee suggests adding is that the review board may require a building energy model. Again, not required of everybody, but might be required. And that the items that are then added here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are essentially language that had been in the existing design guidelines document and is now being moved into the site plan review law document. So comments on any or all of those?
So just to clarify, this is basically a lateral move.
Yeah, I
Yes.
just wondered
And hang on. I should just also note that these are written with must language, and we'll just go back and change those to shall language to be consistent with the other stuff. Okay. I'm sorry, Barbara.
I was just wondering why it was a good idea to move these. I'm not sure when, you know, I'm open, but I just wonder why.
I think the idea is that the law is a more standing document, and the guidelines / standards separate document it can be more ephemeral things. Technically, the separate guidelines / standards document does not require a public hearing to make changes to, and that's why more ephemeral stuff would go in that document. The thought was to try and make the site plan review law as complete as possible, as comprehensive as appropriate, and keep the more ephemeral stuff in the guidelines / standards standalone document.
Okay. Thank you.
Was there some discussion about whether this 20% and whatever and 25% ratio was an issue, or was that when it was a shall statement as opposed to encouraged?
Yeah. So earlier that had been a shall or must statement. In the guidelines, it is not. In the guidelines, it is just a question. You know, right. Does the development do this? And so there's no negative implication if they don't do it. It's just a question. Mm-hmm. And so I think earlier discussion in the task force suggested that the notion of requiring 20% more insulation than is currently required would be unmanageable and probably unrealistic and probably not saleable, you know, not comfortable to people who might comment at a public hearing. So the thought was here to use the encourage language rather than the shall language.
And those numbers, the 20% and the 25%, those were part of what were in the design guidelines before.
Correct.
I might mention that this fits within the current hope that our new code officer will continue to help educate the public about best practices in energy use and conservation. So having this in here would be helpful.
Good.
In the standards that just came out, for some reason I thought it talked about the ratio as 15%, and I don't have that in front of me. I didn't make a copy of it, but instead of, I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe somebody can. I don't know how to get to it.
The document
what was just sent out.
The document that Michelle sent.
Yeah. It said something about a ratio, and maybe it didn't even pertain to energy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything anything in there actually about energy. I think all the energy stuff got moved into the law.
And how?
I think
Okay, so
Ken, you might,
it may have just been how much window space
Oh, yeah, Ken, the
on the front
15%,
of the building.
the 15% is under fenestration, which is related to walls. And it's a window area of at least 15% of the facade.
Okay, sorry.
And is that compatible with this? I guess so.
well, I'll just say from a, oftentimes in what I've heard in sitting on a development review team for a few years, from developers was that the more windows that are required, the harder it is to insulate. Right? For those of you who own homes, that might make sense. So I think there's a little bit of a balance between requiring windows and then requiring, additional insulation. This is certainly an industry area. I believe Mark wrote in the chat that this comes from the County 239 guidelines. So, the town, it looks like, I think with this being in part of the review, it's trying to maintain consistency with county best practices.
Yeah, so it seems like if you compare this, which is a window to wall ratios of less than 25%, and the language in the standards that we'll get to that Ken pointed out, which is to have a window area of at least 15% of the facade, that leads me to believe that what we're then requiring is somewhere between 15 and 25%.
Right. Encouraging.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Okay. Anything else on items Roman numeral 1 through 8 there? Okay. Then N, scenic resources. Again, not block or alter scenic resources, which are were defined earlier as we discussed, and then adding in that the review board may request a visual impact assessment. Barbara has a question.
Yeah, well, it's not so much a question, but I would say as seen from public roads and trails.
Good.
Everybody okay with that?
It's good addition.
You can, or public rights of way. I guess often trails might be easements over people's property. So maybe that is better to say public roads and trails, just to capture that private property. Trying to think of wanting an all-inclusive language here. I'm sort of just thinking off the cuff here about how to might capture anything where the public can go. Typically, it's just saying the public right of way.
Is it a public right of way if the Finger Lakes Trail crosses a private property?
And that's what I'm sort of mulling out loud here.
Mark is nodding yes.
Yeah, I would think so. That if the public is allowed to go there, it is a public right of way. It's not necessarily a town-owned right of way, like a road or a town-owned property, but it is public access, place where the public is allowed.
Okay.
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 Can I ask a pragmatic question? I'm just thinking ahead of how this might be read. I'm just wondering how a development would not alter scenic resources. I can understand that not block, but I can't understand how it might not alter. Kind of goes back to that question we had last week of how traffic would not be increased.
I think it's the definition of scenic resources is the question,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
It will certainly alter the way things look, but we're suggesting that we need to do an inventory of scenic resources in the town. And so it would be those identified scenic resources, not just how things look.
Okay. Okay, then getting on to O, plant and animal resources. Development shall preserve, we'll change the must language, shall preserve and maintain contiguous mature woodlands greater than 5 acres, should avoid disturbance of existing hedgerows and tree lines, must not adversely impact important natural resources, including critical environmental areas, unique natural areas, and state mapped areas of significant natural communities, nor species that are endangered or threatened, and shall conserve to the extent possible the habitats, I'll correct the typos here, of species of special concern, species of greatest conservation need, and common birds in steep decline. All of those capitalized items were defined earlier in the list of definitions.
Doesn't the second sentence there, isn't that in your standards document? And a question, contiguous is, if I remember the last time I asked that, it was what is next to you.
Yep.
How do you maintain something that isn't yours?
No.
Woodland.
It doesn't mean adjacent. Contiguous means
Doesn't mean what?
it doesn't mean adjacent. So it doesn't mean on lands next to you. At least my understanding of this would be.
That's right.
You want to explain it, Barb?
No, contiguous is just kind of not fragmented. So a mature woodland that's all like 1 5-acre plot that's all connected to one another. So on your property, on the property that's being developed. So not like, 1 acre in one corner and then another acre in another corner and it's not connected. So contiguous means connected. Ken, I think you were asking about adjacent. In a prior discussion, we talked about lands or areas that are adjacent to a developed property. Adjacent is next to.
But I believe it used contiguous.
This says contiguous, right? Contiguous is
farther
connected.
Back in this document, unless it got changed.
No, this is what Ellen is showing you says contiguous. So this is on the property that they want to develop. If there's an undisturbed, continuous, connected, mature woodland greater than 5 acres, then this is triggered.
Do we define mature woodlands in the definitions?
I don't think so. It's not capitalized here. I'm also trying to look through in the standards document.
I think it does have this.
Yeah, so in the standards document under agricultural impact, it does say that it says the exact same thing as the second sentence. So it would probably remain here and come out of the standards document.
Okay.
Can I just ask for clarification for you all regarding, I just want to have a clear picture of what this means. Must preserve and maintain. Does that mean no intervention in it, or does that mean no clear cutting? What is the intention behind here?
I think the intention is not knocking it down as part of the development proposal.
But if it would be, let's say, conceivably, let's say a family has owned 10 acres of contiguous woods for years with the plan for their children to return to the area and build houses in the woods, which would require a road, et cetera, et cetera. Is that what we're...
Well, this is site plan review. That wouldn't trigger site plan review.
Well, it probably would, because it would be, if, let's just say that, I'm just thinking, I'm just trying to imagine the response to this. And if there were 2 or 3 houses proposed, that probably
Disturbing.
would trigger site plan review. You hear what I'm just trying to ask?
Yeah. It's a good question.
And I ask that because there's on Bessemer Hill, just the land directly adjacent to me. Years ago, a family did build a road all the way to the top of the hill, and with the intention, actually, they had intended to sell off parcels. It never worked, but there are at least 2 family structures up there now. I'm just trying to imagine how this could work.
Good question.
Barbara Lynch.
This is not directly related to that, but in the second sentence, you say that development should avoid disturbance to the extent practicable. Again, I think to say should minimize disturbance seems a little stronger to me and less waffly than to the extent practicable.
It's interesting because to me it's weaker.
Oh, okay.
It says avoid disturbance as much as you can. That says minimize. Anyway, I'm not sure if it's just semantics.
Yeah.
But I think Tim's question is important. And I don't know, the idea is, yes, if you pave that road and put in 4 houses, you have destroyed the woodland habitat. And I don't know where to go with that. People obviously are not going to be happy with the idea that you can't mess around in your woodlands.
Yeah, I think that is an important issue. I'm trying to look at the prior guidelines to see how woodlands were covered, and I'm not finding that right away. So I'm hearing that we should probably take that out.
Well, maybe rather than take it out,
Modify it.
maybe it becomes more like this other sentence.
Are we still talking about the first sentence now or the second?
The first sentence, must preserve and maintain contiguous mature
First.
woodlands greater than 5 acres. So the current guideline, the current guidelines, hang on a minute, the current guidelines where this idea came from and was made more specific based on some other communities' site plan review laws. The Town of Caroline current guidelines ask the question, will the proposed development preserve and maintain mature woodlands, existing fields, pastures, and meadows, blah, blah, blah. So it just asks, will the proposed development preserve and maintain mature woodlands? So this language says it must preserve and maintain mature woodlands, of contiguous greater than 5 acre size. So we could, I think that limitation of 5 acres in size being of interest was added because you couldn't have language that says the development must preserve and maintain all mature woodlands. So there was some clarification that was aimed to be added to that, but this language probably doesn't achieve that purpose.
And I think in part, the rest of that section goes on to talk about dealing with other habitats. And I don't think mature woodlands are an important habitat, but there's actually going to be a presentation at the planning board meeting on Thursday about the importance of meadow habitat and other habitats. And so to some extent, we're trying to address that in the development must not adversely affect important natural resources, blah, blah, blah.
So how about if we delete the first sentence and instead have the second sentence say the development should avoid disturbance of mature woodlands, comma, existing hedgerows and tree lines, blah, 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 to the extent practicable.
I could live with that.
That sounds more palatable.
Yeah, and if that sounds good, Barb, I support that. What I was going to get at here, this might be a good topic. You know, if 5 acres is a number people are gravitate to, this might be a good topic. Well, let me actually back up. And we've talked a lot about how zoning might enhance some of these topic areas. That's no secret now. The zoning plays a good role in administering a site plan review law, as extensive as what is being proposed, and just in general, it's even just recommended to have a zoning ordinance to administer a site plan. This site plan review law is definitely pushing the limits of what, you know, is appropriate for site plan review. And I was trying to think when we're going over this, is this something that goes in a zoning, or, you know, really, I think this kind of topic about disturbance of plant and animal resources, environmental resources, these might be good topics to think more broadly on, and we haven't touched on this topic yet, but of a town environmental quality review. The way that I just want to sort of jump here about the way that the state administers their Environmental Quality Review Act is, it's not just looking at all of a sudden something disturbs 5 acres and then the project gets a negative declaration of environmental significance. It's sort of just a weighing different standards and thresholds. Is one area a high impact, and then maybe other areas have low impact? So we haven't really touched on environmental quality review and how that might play a role in covering some of these topics, and maybe we will have time to get there in the next month and a half. But I just want to maybe keep that in the back of your minds. I think for right now, I do support Barb's language on this specific site plan review law, because that's what we're talking about tonight. But keep in the back of your mind that some of these plant, animal, environmental, wetland resources can go very well in an environmental quality review for a project, that the town can weigh how much impact is really being had, that maybe there is disturbance to a 5-acre woodland, and for this project we're going to rate that pretty high. It's a very detrimental impact to this, you know, this specific piece of land, and maybe in other projects it doesn't seem that high because it's in a very large piece of property that only a few acres are disturbed out of that larger area. So we can get to that topic later if we have time and energy. But anyway, for right now, I support Barb's language.
So how does it read again then?
It would be plant and animal resources, then delete the first sentence. So the paragraph would start, the development should avoid disturbance of mature woodlands and existing hedgerows and tree lines between fields, pastures, meadows to the extent practicable.
Okay,
And
so if I own 8 acres, 5 of it happens to be woods, the other 3 going to build on, and so but it is a mature woodland now. Let's say it's hemlocks in particular, or pines, and if it's mature, myself, I'm gonna have a logger come in and say, hey, I bought this property. I want to build this whatever on these 3 acres, but I need the money from this woods that, since it's mature. I mean, obviously not every tree is mature, but it's a mature woods. It's due to be thinned. Is that acceptable by your statement?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I'm good with it.
Okay. All right. Let's see, where are we? Then we go on to P, historic, archaeological, and cultural resources. Again, this was adapting from the current guidelines question into what will be a shell statement. Okay. Q is architectural and design features. Again, saying structures must be compatible with the rural character of the town. I think this was language we had talked about rural character earlier on in some of our discussions, and people were fine with referring to the rural character of the town and the town's comprehensive plan. And then some of the things that it refers to here, building placement, materials, massing, fenestration, those are elaborated on in the separate standards document. Okay.
So I guess I'm just wondering why why we're having this here if we already have the same thing in the other document.
Well, it's not. So this this two sentences is not in the other document. But for example, under massing, so here it just says this includes massing, and under the design standards, massing
Right.
has a sentence that goes with that. Buildings that are larger than a footprint of 1,500 square feet must be designed as a series of smaller masses or design components. So again, trying to keep the principle in the law, the concept in the law, but then elaborating on what that concept means in the more ephemeral standards document.
And if we were to decide in our discussions to wrap the design standards into the law, probably then we could address this at that time.
Correct. And then basically what all is in the separate standards document would, like the items in the standards document that refer to building placement, materials, massing, fenestration would become bullets underneath this section.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I make a comment?
Yeah, Greg.
I think this should reference the proposed design standards. I was looking up where they're actually referenced, and I know that it's below in a section that we'll get to about the review boards. Not to jump ahead, but it's in the section about the review board review, and that's where it actually references the design standards. But before that, they're only referenced in the definition. So I think this might be an appropriate place to say something along the lines of, and they must meet the standards in the design standards document.
Okay.
Or shall.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yes. Okay, and then R was buffering existing uses, again, just requiring maintaining sufficient buffer to minimize conflicts.
Is that too vague?
Vague.
It's pretty vague, but
In other words, what is a sufficient buffer area?
Yeah, this is definitely getting into setbacks, and we talked about that a few meetings ago. Again, it's this is definitely pushing the limit of the site plan review, but it is vague, so maybe it's.
We're addressing this somewhat if we include noise.
Yeah.
And lighting requirements.
That's what I was thinking, is that is this covered in other areas? There's the stream buffer that I think is pretty sound. The lighting, noise. So
we're not covering visual buffer. So somebody could put up a building without zoning, they could put it right at the property line. Is that right?
Unless there's typically building, Ken brought this up at one meeting about how his new building had to be 3 feet from a property line. There's likely building code standards that require you to be a certain distance from a property line. And oftentimes zoning and building code standards just butt heads. But you don't have, so I think the building code would take precedent in this situation, and you would likely not be able to build right on the property line.
So is there really a problem with keeping this vague in the sense that the site plan review board would interpret this in the context of a site plan review that is proposed to it, and it would then, you know, ask questions about what the impact is going to, what the, you know, potential conflict is going to be between the development site and the neighboring uses. And rather than trying to put a hard limit on distance or a hard limit on what kinds of conflicts might need to be mitigated in advance, this allows the review board to make those judgments. Is there a problem inherent in doing that?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so when it's like when it's this open-ended.
I think that would work.
I just brought it up because of the precedent, worrying about the fact that the previous law didn't have enough teeth. So it's just it was a flag.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and as others have pointed out, there's a lot more teeth that we're adding to this to the law, but it might be difficult to really reach a hard and fast buffer for all conflicts, all potential conflicts.
And what was sufficient would depend in part on what the neighboring use is.
Right.
And you could also have delineate a minimum, and the minimum then might be used by a developer, where without the minimum, the developer might be more flexible in negotiations. So
yeah. Okay. All right, so moving on then to section 3030, economic and fiscal impact. This would be a new section, but it's something that we've talked about prior in the task force, that the development shall minimize adverse impacts on existing businesses, particularly local businesses located in the town, and should support the town's continued economic viability. In addition, the development shall not have a negative net fiscal impact on the town budget, and the review board may require an economic impact assessment. So this is both trying to make sure that the development doesn't cause a whole lot more use of services that the town has to pay for or provide, and that the development doesn't close out existing businesses because of what it's doing. So that kind of is captured here.
I mean, I gotta say, this one is, here I am on the review board, it's a little difficult to figure out how I would deal with a proposal.
Well, and that's, I would assume, if the review board has significant concerns, it would be in that kind of case that the review board would require an economic impact assessment.
And what would we be doing? We'd be asking the developer to discuss these other things?
To conduct an economic impact assessment,
No,
which is
sort of doing that. What are we asking?
Oh yeah. So this would be in the list of information that they need to be providing, and they would be providing their, not a true full-fledged economic impact assessment, but their judgment, based on the information at hand, their judgment about the impacts on the town budget, town's economic viability, and existing businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And
What if-
the board might disagree with that.
Right.
Ken?
Yeah, our group had not come up with an economic impact statement per se, but we came up with a lot of questions, and maybe like the standards that you have, we might include in there someplace a lot of these different questions. What'll happen to roads? What'll happen to other businesses? What pay you're gonna hire how many people? You're gonna pay so much property tax, etc. Those questions into a separate section. I don't know. Just as questions for the site review plan people to think about and ask a developer.
And it might be useful to enumerate those a little bit in here.
Yeah.
I think that could
Either
clarify the
separate
intent.
section.
Well, there is a separate section that talks about what the developer or the applicant has to provide
Okay.
to as part of this site plan review.
And does that include these economic kinds of questions? I don't remember that it does.
Well, we can look at that when we get down to section 34, the site plan checklist down below. And we can take a look at it there.
Okay. But I think we're agreeing that it would be good to have it somewhere.
Yeah.
It probably should be defined, and it's not in the definition section yet.
What is it?
Oh, sorry, economic impact assessment. And maybe that's an appropriate place of listing out things that it should include to be looked at.
Well, actually, I think absolutely a definition of economic impact assessment would be a good idea. But I think what we're saying is, short of requiring a full economic impact assessment, we would want to know how many employees there are going to be. We would want to know what the impact on town services would be.
Mm-hmm.
And that wouldn't necessarily be a full, quote, economic impact analysis assessment, but that's something we'd want everybody to tell us, right?
There's something I would also add, right, even here, and that is, would the development or the commercial development provide services to people in the town that are not there now? Or
I'm not sure I understand your question.
it's not so much a question, but a suggestion that there is a positive economic, an economic good if a commercial development is serving a public that is now underserved. An example would be, say, a drugstore. If the nearest pharmacy is at Judd Falls Road, it might be nice to have a pharmacy that people in the town of Caroline can get to more easily. That's a benefit. So, that's also should be included in an economic impact assessment.
Well, and not even in an economic impact assessment. It should be included in the list of things that the developer would address.
Yeah. hmm
So again, you don't need to necessarily have them hire a consultant or whatever, but for the
No.
say, we're going to provide this and it's not currently in the town. So I think enumerating the list of things that we should be thinking about would be good. And again, that's something that the Economic Assessment Committee would want to come up with, that kind of a list. I think that
And
would
the
be,
question is when, Tim?
what do you mean? Come up with it as we're revising this law now.
Okay.
Don't you think? Because I haven't really thought about these things as much as you guys clearly have.
Mhm.
So a list of, how many employees, what kind of services would be required from the town, what kind of services you'd be providing to the town. Yeah.
We sent in to everybody, I think, our suggestion. I'll try and find it and send it to everyone again.
And
There
you
were
think,
a lot of questions that we came up with.
We can go back and get that out, Ken. We can find out.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, anything else on that?
Do I dare play devil's advocate again?
Sure.
So let's just say that there's a standing business in the town that's kind of hung on for a long time, not really very efficient, blah, blah, blah. Let's say somebody else in the town sees an opportunity for competition. I'm thinking like my grandfather now, and thinks that they could provide the same thing in a better way. Would this language preclude that?
well, this doesn't preclude anything. It says minimize,
Right.
so it wouldn't preclude anything.
I'm just playing devil's advocate and thinking what I might hear.
And I'll also comment too, I think I sent around to all the group, or maybe it was just the economic impact group. I can't remember if regarding the village of Trumansburg's, they recently required an economic impact assessment. Did I send that to the whole group?
I don't remember it.
You don't remember it? So it doesn't look like, just from just going through the village's zoning ordinance, and they also have an environmental quality review. They don't specifically say this language here. So what I imagine is that, so just a little bit of a quick backstory, because it is already 8:20. It's just that there's a proposed development, a residential development in the village. And as part of that review, and it's been a long review, a few multi-year review of this new residential subdivision and development, that the village planning board did require an economic impact analysis. I can send that around again if I need. But in looking at their local laws, subdivision, their village environmental quality review law, their zoning ordinance, there's no actual language about must require an economic impact analysis, or even a hint at requiring it. So what I'm guessing is that it might have been part of their Village Environmental Quality Review Act, their VEQR, and we've been talking about a TEQR, the Town Environmental Quality Review Act, which does take into account not only impact environmental resources, but also it can include the impact on economic resources. So what I'm getting at is that maybe one, it doesn't need to be just explicitly stated in the site plan review law, that maybe this is something either the town can just ask for as part of a site plan review. I feel like that's maybe a little bit of a stretch. I'm not sure, or if it needs to be part of something like a Town Environmental Quality Review Act. I'm not sure either way, I guess, and so maybe it doesn't hurt to have it in there. But when you have it in there, I think that there does need to be a little bit more explanation of what it is, and which is what I think the conversation is going at right now. I'm just bringing up this other example locally where it's not stated anywhere in their laws, but they have required it through some sort of mechanism.
So if I could just jump in on these questions that are being raised for this and a couple of other items about whether it's appropriately in a site plan review law or not. To me, that seems like that's a question for the attorney. So if we want to, if we think the concept has merit, and understanding that the town of Caroline doesn't currently have a TECR process, if we think that this idea of having the applicant look at economic and fiscal impact in some way is valuable to do, the mechanism that we have at hand is the site plan review law. So keep it in the site plan review law draft and let the attorney, our town attorney, tell us it doesn't belong here. It's not appropriate to have here, and then it comes out. Rather than we making the relatively uninformed decision to take it out now just because we think maybe it shouldn't appear here, but we're not quite sure.
What?
Agreed.
Okay, so I think
So
what we've said.
You're not gonna put examples under this like ABCD. Is that what you're just gonna leave that as the way it is?
No.
No, I was going to summarize, I think, what we're hearing. So we're hearing that economic impact assessment needs to be added to the definitions. So that will have a little bit more clarity about what that means. And that when we get down to section 34 in this document, we can make sure that the applicant is required to provide some information about economic impact and fiscal impact to the town. But we're not there yet.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. All right. So then going to the next section, 3040, site restoration requirements for formula business and heavy industry actually should be just industry, because I think we said that this should pertain to all industry, heavy and light industry, and that escrow funds appropriate for restoration might be required. And again, I think this is an item that a question was raised whether the attorney would allow us to keep this, or would recommend that it be removed, or allow us to keep it in here or not. But I don't know that we have the expertise to determine that unless somebody not on the subcommittee does.
I would just say funds sufficient to restore a site to its pre-development state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ken?
I think that the title of that should be site restoration requirements, and
You could delete that.
Delete it.
are for all development coming under the site plan review. It shouldn't be just, formula businesses, heavy industry, light industry, all that should be a requirement for all
Not a bad idea.
development coming under site plan review.
Because it's
What
just
we're trying to say is if you build a dilapidated building and you abandon it, you're gonna take care of it. I think that's what it says.
Yes. I think that makes sense.
Any concerns about that? Okay. All right, so we'll move on. To, let's see, the next series. So we come to section 34, which is the site plan checklist. That's where the next red is, Ellen. If you,
I understand that. I just wanted to be sure nobody had comments on the rest of it.
sure, okay.
So those are unchanged. Get to this. And what this means is these are things that the applicant is required to submit.
Yes. So basically what has been added in here are things that, you know, we've talked about in the other substantive additions. So I'll just make a note that C, the woodlands, the language, including identifying woodlands of greater than 5 contiguous acres, that would come out because we removed that from the language above.
No, we didn't. We removed it from being a must preserve to shall to the extent possible, I think is what we did.
No, we took out the 5 greater than, we took out the 5 contiguous acres language.
So we're not asking them to identify mature woodlands at all?
We're asking them to identify woodlands, but not woodlands of greater than 5 contiguous acres. Essentially, we're asking them to identify woodlands, period.
Okay. Help me, there was some issues brought up, I forget whether that was where it came from, that in the definition of floodplains, I would have to go back and I don't want to scroll and make you all dizzy. Floodplains, are we only including those that are mapped as 100-year flood zones, or what is our definition there? Somebody else want to stroll back?
You've captured our screens.
Okay, floodplain is defined as any land located within a regulatory floodway defined in the flood damage prevention local law.
So the question then becomes, my understanding is that's only going to be on the major streams. It's not going to be the floodplains, the associated with smaller streams. I don't have that law in front of me, but what was raised was the fact that one, FEMA has only mapped like the big streams and not smaller ones, and two, that the 100-year flood zone maps are outdated, that we're seeing a lot more floods than the 100-year flood is no longer a 100-year flood. So I don't know whether we want to deal with that in any way. The place to deal with it would be in the definitions, really.
Right. I'm not sure unless there's some external standard that the town documents can refer to. I'm not sure that it would be wise for the town to come up with its own definition of floodplain.
Yep.
Could there be language that recognizes the uncertainty, that what FEMA has defined as a floodplain in 1990 may not capture what is currently a floodplain, so that this is subject to change? We can look and see if there are new standards, but I don't think there are.
So either. And we also, I'm not sure anywhere here, okay, we said surface water, creeks, streams, springs, lakes, ponds. So I suppose that's a broad definition. So I have an ephemeral stream that runs on my property. Ephemeral, it's there in the spring and it's not there in the summer, I would assume that would be part of what should be on the map, yes?
Yeah.
And is it included if we, the way it's written, do we think?
Well, this, you know, without, so this says number 3, existing conditions, is the applicant needs to include a description of existing conditions, including all of these things. So also, I mean, as it's written now, it's all surface waters, including creeks, streams, springs, lakes, and ponds. If we add more specific language, then you're actually narrowing the amount of information or type of information that they need to be providing.
Unless you would say, including ephemeral.
Yeah, including intermittent, streams with intermittent flow and vernal pools.
Okay.
Yeah. That sounds good.
What I could imagine while you're typing that, what I could imagine, I'm trying to play this out in my head of a proposed development. So going back to the floodplains and wetlands, those are regulated at state and federal level. The county actually on wetlands, the county has just gone through a major wetland mapping study. And so I believe that now can be referenced, but just for the purposes of this conversation, using those sort of just language of wetlands, I think captures all state and federal wetlands. About the surface waters, that the developer would likely use, national data sets, the National Hydrography data set, that would not include ephemeral streams. So here there's interest to include these ephemeral branches, tributaries. So, sometimes those can get captured on like a topographic map, and I believe that's probably required as part of this, topography with contours of no more than 2-foot intervals. And so those might just show up anyway. Asking a developer, and even when we think developer, I think often our thought is somebody with deep pockets, but our conversation does go back to thinking about somebody in your town. Think about a neighbor that might just want to open up a business. To go out and map, my first job out of college was mapping ephemeral streams, and it was a big developer with deep pockets, and it was not cheap to go out and send a crew out to do surveying to map streams that are flowing 25% of the year. So I would say that topography probably captures those areas best. Yeah, I think in general, just just thinking about what certain standards and requirements can help to capture other ones.
So are we okay with keeping item F, instead of adding ephemeral waters? F refers to topography, and it talks about soil types and existing or proposed water courses. So that would cover that kind of
That's okay.
ephemeral water course. Okay.
Good.
All right. Okay, so I don't have anything, again, this, all of these A through whatever it is, A through R under item 3 are the developer describes the existing conditions. So any other comments about that?
Yeah.
Ken, go ahead.
Are you down to K yet?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. On K, I'm concerned about an area suitable. No endangered species there at all. And somebody says, well, that's suitable for the leopard, yeah,
Something.
spotted salamander. Okay, just I don't care if they're endangered or not. That's suitable for spotted salamanders, but there ain't none there. Is that I think to say a habitat's suitable for something, how does one even know? Oh, I don't see how you can say just any habitat is suitable. It's suitable for something, even if it ain't there.
So I think
don't know why.
so. Ken, I believe
Yep.
I believe in the case of endangered species, at least, maybe threatened as well, that if a plot of land is within the range of that endangered species and does contain habitats suitable for that endangered species, whether or not those organisms have been found on that plot of land, the endangered species law does kick in. But it has to be within range. So, so like if the spotted salamander is not known to occur in the state of New York, let's just say that it is, but let's just say it's not, then even though the habitat is, quote, suitable, it's not within range of that species. But that's for endangered species. It's not for these other kinds of things.
The other thing, Ken, is it actually is can be onerous to require somebody to do a study to see whether these species are on that property. So I'm not sure you'd be doing somebody a favor to say, now you have to go out there and find out whether there are any spotted salamanders on this property. That would require hiring a consultant to go out there and do it. So it's, I got to get a plug.
Because now you tell me about the range of the endangered species, and obviously there's a list. And when you say range, you're saying within 10 feet or within, you don't have to come up with the number, but 10, I mean, the close proximity is the range, or you're talking about miles away?
No, range is a very large expanse of where that species has been known to occur. So like the range of a Canada goose includes Canada, it includes North America, it includes where it winters, in the southern clime. So the range of the Canada goose is continental.
I'm not saying anything more.
What you're saying are good questions, Ken.
So one of the concerns here is whether that's too constraining. And so what if we changed it to areas of habitat suitable for or containing endangered or threatened species, leave that as it is, or or containing species of special concern, species of greatest conservation need, or common birds in steep decline.
I don't think that's good.
Okay.
Again, that's putting a lot of onus on the developer to try to do a study to say whether those species are there. That's not a trivial thing to do.
That's right.
Yeah, this is definitely an extensive study. It's one thing to go on the environmental resource mapper, which is referenced up above, and just pull some layers down and just put them on a map. That's fairly straightforward. Although I want to loop back to that because I don't agree that you should say any feature, because there are some really sort of loose kind of things that are mapped out. But
So just to note, Greg, that's the existing law, is any feature.
any feature.
Yeah, that's in the existing law. The only correction there was made on H was that it referred to the environmental resource map.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually
Okay.
mapper is the correct terminology.
All right. Never mind.
Yeah.
But that might cover, then that's good to know. And that might cover part of K, areas of habitat, because on the environmental resource mapper for a project, it will pull up information about habitat suitable for or containing endangered or threatened species. It will pull up a list of that. So that might not be necessary to just repeat.
So would it though pull up, and I don't know this, would it pull up species of special concern and species of greatest conservation need? I don't know that it would. I know for sure that it does not pull up common birds in steep decline because that's not a DEC designation.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't pull up either of the ones you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Unless they're, they overlap in the endangered or threatened species category.
Yeah.
Again, these are very good topics if they are of interest of the town. To be protecting. These are very good topics to look at as part of a different mechanism, one that's a little bit an environmental quality review.
So are we saying to leave these as is? I'm not sure that we've reached consensus here.
I wonder whether we could get the good map people at the county to create maps for us of these things, the habitats that service these different species. Because they are, defined somewhere. And if we were able to make a map for the town of Caroline, then it would not be onerous on a developer to show where their development was going to be relative to those areas. I don't know if that would be feasible.
As someone who works for a county, and if I were to get this request from a town, I would say it's certainly possible, but it would be a larger project. Because I would imagine, without knowing too much about these topics, they have to do often with land cover, land characteristics,
Right.
and a whole host of factors that you'd sort of probably weigh and then do some sort of GIS analysis on and figure out what appropriate areas. And those are really fun analyses, don't get me wrong, but they do take significant staff time and resources. And as you all know, the county is pretty tight right now on resources.
Let me think a little bit more about this and talk to some of the people who care a lot about conserving these things and see if they can be of any help.
Okay.
I would just like to add for me, I'm a bird lover. I don't know a lot about birds. I know one is that I began to miss being a kid was the bobolink.
Yep.
And in the past few years, the weather, because has brought, because we can't get into field as early as we used to, like we did this year in May, bobolinks have come back some in my fields. And I'm proud of that. This year I probably did, well, we had an unusual year. You don't usually get it in May, but we have some fields that are not cut till August time, and we've had 6 to 8 bobolinks the last couple years. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to do all these things out. I just think it's, if you can come up with the maps like you're talking about, Ellen, then it's set them down in front of the developer. Oh yeah, right here. We got this right here. But to ask them to do that on their own and figure out what might be there, I think is too difficult.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ellen will look into that item and see if we can add some clarity about how the developer is supposed to figure out what information to provide. Then the last item in that section is L, which used to be down at R, but we just moved it up to scenic resources on or adjacent to the site or within view of the development. So this is consistent with some of the other language that we've talked about prior. Okay. Okay, and then getting into number 4, this is now information that the developer, yeah, Ken, go ahead.
Could you just back up to page 28 for a second? And whoop, you went the other way. I just had a question about 28. I mean, 31 there. Is there presently a permit fee chart? You know, I mean, 31.
The subunit submit permit fee. Is that,
You mean,
Yeah,
is there a
is
fee
there a
schedule,
chart?
Ken? There is a fee schedule.
Pardon?
There is a fee schedule.
Okay, all right. It wasn't, I didn't see it in any player where in this part
Yeah, where is it? I don't remember.
of this whole,
I mean,
this whole
town-
document. I didn't see it in there. I
oh,
just wondered what it was, that's all.
no, I don't think it's in there, but we have a fee schedule for the fees that we charge for this and that
Okay.
through site plan review.
The town clerk or the permit officer would have one of those.
Yes.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Good.
okay, so again, this is number 4 under the site plan checklist, and this is what the developer, this is information the developer, the applicant needs to provide about the proposed development. So this is where we've clarified things like, you know, building placement and density, massing materials, and so on. Predicted energy use, predicted noise. This is where we should take a look and see if the economic stuff needs to be clarified here. You know, if they need to provide more economic information here.
Okay. The other thing I would also add is something on solid waste production and management.
Good idea. And so Barbara Lynch, this is where you would, or your economic group would develop a list of what should be submitted?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the solid waste is a good idea.
Any comments, any other comments on this, on this section?
Drainage. So does this include grading? Changing of the land contours and surface? Am I missing something? Placing buildings?
Grading plan. I, erosion control plans, including grading plans
Yeah.
if existing elevations are to be changed more than 4 feet.
Okay.
So what I would suggest is that when we have the next, when the subcommittee works on the next revision of this, we should just make a note to ourselves to take a close look at this section to make sure that there's nothing in our discussion with the task force that we've added in or taken out that has an impact on this section, you know, in terms of what the applicant needs to provide about the development. So, so I'll say that the subcommittee should take a look at this.
Great.
Okay, let's see, is there anything else in this document? I think number 42 was just changing the language, the reference to design guidelines to design standards, because that's what we're recommending the other document change to. And I think that was it for this document.
Whoa.
Okay.
Good. And if the section that Greg is going to be working on of notification, that would go somewhere up in here, I assume, right?
Yeah, it would probably go toward, yeah, down in the end, yeah. somewhere in the application process, it would go.
Yeah.
While I have the floor, I'm wondering, after going through all of this, and there's certainly areas that are pretty large, I'm wondering if, so we still have to go through the design standards document, which I'm guessing we do at the following meeting. But I think what might be helpful is if I also send along examples of local environmental quality reviews. What does everyone think about that? Because I don't want to necessarily derail us from this site planning process that you all have worked very, very hard on this. But after going through all of this, and there's certainly questions and issues raised with how large is this site plan review going, and you know, there might be some things that are significant on applicants. A lot of these topics are appropriate to be reviewed, you know, maybe through another mechanism. You know, some things can be mapped. Great, we can just map that and have the developer show it. But when to ask for some sort of larger study, there might be another mechanism to do that. And so I wonder, as just part of reviewing this, and I'll add language about the notification requirements, that I also just add a few examples of town environmental quality acts, so everyone can just see if there are topics covered in those laws that might aid some of this process in the site plan law. How does that sound?
I think sending that to look at is a good idea. My sense of the way those kinds of laws work is that it could be useful if it was something requiring significant review, but that in general, the seeker reviews that I see coming through are so, what do I want to say? They have no teeth. They're, you know, check this box here and there, and it really doesn't cut to the really important issues unless you go for a major environmental impact, right? So for the most part, it's a negative declaration, fine, go ahead. And those are so trivial, I find them offensive, I would say. And So unless it's a really big deal development, you wouldn't be looking at a lot of the questions that I think we would like to look at even on smaller scale things. But I don't know whether other people have the same sense of it.
Greg, I just have a structural question in this regard. So would a town environmental quality review potentially duplicate what we're doing here, site plan review, or supplement it?
It would
And
supplement it.
So it well could be that for this task force, a town environmental quality review could be a tool that it could recommend that the town board pursue or consider in the future, right? Instead of our retooling everything to do that now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what I'll do, I'll find some. I have a couple examples, but I can just get a little bit more of them and just see some of these. I just want to see if some of these other examples might touch on some of the subjects that are being brought up tonight, such as these extended areas of plant and animal resources and species of concern, just to see how far those laws go. And maybe to Ellen, to your point, that maybe they're just as general as the seeker law is, and I agree, it sometimes is just a bunch of check boxes, and the town doesn't have much say. But yeah, we haven't even talked. Sorry.
I would like to see some. I think that's great.
Sure. Okay. But yeah, I don't want to derail this process because I think this is good. And I think you all have heard that I've brought up just some sort of broad concerns I've had about, and how far is this going? And, yes, some of that will be delineated by the attorney. So let's just keep working on it. And this will also give me time. I'm to work on the design standards more. I wasn't able to work on them as well last week. I let the site plan committee know that last week was a very busy week there were rising COVID cases in Cayuga County, and I was working overtime with the health department, and it was a total nightmare. So this will actually give me a little bit more time to work on the design standards too, because I do want to add or suggest some things. I want to find pictures too, graphics. I think would be good in that. So I'll do that.
So next week, probably it seems like what we should do at the very outset is walk through the design standards document. And then if we had time, perhaps it would be time also just to think broadly in terms of what other directions we might be interested in recommending that the town board consider and pursue as additional tools, one of which it sounds from everything that we've heard throughout the process, whether from the attorneys or state law, that a lot of this stuff sounds like it would be much stronger embedded in some kind of basic zoning. I mean, things like this, I think we'll want to clarify for ourselves in the next couple of weeks as well. Does that sound reasonable?
It does, except one thing in terms of this is get back to that question I said I would try to look at, which is the habitat question.
Oh, sure. Oh, of course. That's understood. Yeah.
And Barbara's list of economic analysis.
Right.
Right. So Ken and I should probably exchange emails and get that list in shape and
Great.
bring it to the next meeting.
Perfect.
Or before the next meeting, send it to us. Yes. Good.
Okay.
And Greg, is it my understanding then that you're going to take the design standards document that Michelle sent around and you're going to work on that and then send it to the whole task force to use as the basis for Monday night's discussion?
Yes, or send it to your subcommittee, or at this point, if you think just sending it along.
I'm just a little bit concerned about time,
Yeah.
timing, because
Sure.
I don't think task force people like to get this, like just a day ahead of time. So,
Yeah.
I think it really needs to reach people like by Friday to give them the weekend to look at it. And so I don't want to put too much pressure on you then to, have to get something done in the next 2 days so that the subcommittee then can look at it. So my recommendation would be just you take the next shot at it and send it to the entire task force if Ellen and Michelle are okay with that. And I'm seeing Ellen thumbs up. And I'm seeing Michelle with her thumbs up too. So
Okay.
how about if we do that? Is
That
that
sounds
okay with
great.
you, Tim?
Absolutely. No, I think it's, since we already kind of have had a chance to look it over, seems like it should just be sent to everybody. It'll just be more efficient. That's great.
Okay.
Clearly, we're going to have our work cut out for us again next Monday to get through the design standards, and then the few items from site plan that we still have left over, and then we'll just see how much time we have. Does that sound good?
Very good.
Okay.
Once again, I just want to say thank you very much to everybody. This is an incredible amount of work.
Looks
And
like Ken needs to say something.
sorry, Ken.
Yep, I'd just like to say thank you also to the subcommittee with all the work they've done. That's been a tremendous amount of work, and I really appreciate it. And hope you don't mind some of the stupid questions I ask, but I'm learning.
No questions are stupid,
Thank you very
Ken.
much.
No questions are stupid. We appreciate all the discussion that all the task force members have given.
Oh, crap. Okay, I gotta go. There's a house
Great.
and a cat.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Have a
Good
good
night.
night.
Thank
See you.
you.
Bye.
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 Now, good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.